6 signs of a stupid person. The Bible repeatedly warns us. Have you ever met someone who constantly makes bad decisions, refuses to listen to advice, or speaks without thinking? Maybe you've even found yourself making foolish choices at times. The Bible warns us that foolishness is not just about a lack of intelligence, it's a spiritual condition that leads to destruction. Proverbs 14 verse 12 says, "There is a way that appears to be right, but in the end it leads to death." Many people believe they are wise, yet their actions reveal otherwise. They reject wisdom, act impulsively, and refuse to learn from their mistakes. But what does the Bible say about foolishness? How can we recognize and avoid it? In this video, we'll explore 6 signs of a foolish person according to biblical wisdom. Stay with me as we uncover these warning signs and learn how to walk in wisdom instead of foolishness. Your future depends on it. Sign number 1. Rejecting God's wisdom. One of the clearest signs of a foolish person is their rejection of God's wisdom. The Bible says in Proverbs 14 verse 1, "The fool says in his heart, 'There is no God.'" A fool is not just someone who denies God's existence, but also someone who lives as if God's wisdom doesn't matter. Pharaoh, the ruler of Egypt in the book of Exodus, is a perfect example of this. When Moses came with a message from God, Pharaoh refused to listen. Time and time again, he rejected divine wisdom, ignoring the warnings through miracles and plagues. His heart was hardened, and he refused to humble himself before God. Even as his own people suffered, he stood firm in his rebellion. In the end, his refusal to listen led to the destruction of his kingdom and his own downfall. We see this same foolishness in the world today. Many people reject the Bible, calling it outdated or irrelevant. They refuse to accept godly instruction and prefer to follow their own desires. They prioritize material success, personal ambition, and worldly pleasures over spiritual growth. Even when they face consequences for their actions, they refuse to change. The foolish person believes they know better than God. They rely on their own understanding rather than seeking divine wisdom. The Bible warns in Proverbs 3 verses 5 to 6, "Trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways submit to him, and he will make your paths straight." A foolish person refuses to do this, choosing to walk blindly in their own way. The real danger of rejecting God's wisdom is that it leads to destruction. Without God's direction, a person stumbles through life, making choices that harm themselves and others. The first step to wisdom is to acknowledge our need for God. The fool denies this need, but the wise seek him in all things. Sign number 2. Speaking without thinking. A foolish person speaks before they think. The Bible says in Proverbs 18 verse 2, "A fool takes no pleasure in understanding, but only in expressing his opinion." A wise person listens before they speak, but a fool talks too much and listens too little. Throughout the Bible, we see examples of people whose words led to their downfall. The Pharisees, for instance, constantly argued with Jesus instead of learning from him. They were so eager to prove their own righteousness that they failed to understand the truth he was teaching. Their prideful words blinded them, and they ultimately condemned the very Messiah they had been waiting for. In today's world, we see this same foolishness in many forms. People argue endlessly on social media, spreading gossip and division without thinking about the consequences of their words. Many speak in anger, saying things they later regret. Others use their words to manipulate and deceive rather than to build others up. Proverbs 10 verse 19 warns, "When words are many, transgression is not lacking, but whoever restrains his lips is prudent." A foolish person does not restrain their words. They speak impulsively, often harming relationships and damaging their own credibility. The Bible encourages us to be slow to speak and quick to listen. A wise person takes time to understand before responding. They choose words that bring life, not destruction. But a fool refuses to do this, letting their tongue lead them into trouble. Sign number 3, being quick to anger. A foolish person is controlled by their emotions, especially anger. Proverbs 14 verse 29 says, "Whoever is patient has great understanding, but one who is quick-tempered displays folly." Anger itself is not a sin, but uncontrolled anger leads to destruction. A wise person controls their emotions, but a fool lets their emotions control them. Cain, the son of Adam and Eve, is a tragic example of this. When God accepted Abel's offering but rejected his, Cain became furious. Instead of humbling himself and learning from his mistake, he let his anger fester. His unchecked rage led him to murder his own brother. Rather than seeking God's wisdom, Cain allowed his emotions to drive his actions, and as a result, he was cursed. In today's society, we see people who explode in anger over the smallest things. Road rage incidents, workplace conflicts, and family disputes often stem from uncontrolled tempers. Many allow their emotions to dictate their actions, saying or doing things they later regret. James 1 verses 19 to 20 reminds us, "Everyone should be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry, because human anger does not produce the righteousness that God desires." A foolish person ignores this wisdom, reacting with fury rather than patience. They damage relationships and create unnecessary conflict. A wise person learns to control their emotions. They seek God's guidance when they feel anger rising and choose to respond with patience and understanding. But a fool continues to let their emotions rule them, leading to regret and destruction. Sign number 4, refusing correction and discipline. A foolish person hates correction. Proverbs 12 verse 1 states, "Whoever loves discipline loves knowledge, but whoever hates correction is stupid." The Bible makes it clear that discipline is a sign of love. God corrects those he loves, just as a father corrects his children. But a foolish person refuses to accept correction, believing they are always right. King Saul is a perfect example of this. God gave him a clear command through the prophet Samuel, but Saul disobeyed. When confronted with his sin, instead of repenting, he made excuses. He justified his actions rather than accepting responsibility. His refusal to heed correction led to his downfall, and he lost his kingdom. Today, many people reject correction. They get defensive when someone points out their mistakes. They refuse to learn from their failures and repeat the same destructive patterns. A foolish person ignores the wisdom of parents, mentors, and spiritual leaders, believing they know better. Proverbs 15 verse 31 says, "Whoever heeds life-giving correction will be at home among the wise." A wise person welcomes correction because they understand it leads to growth. But a fool resists correction, choosing pride over wisdom. Those who embrace correction grow stronger and wiser. But those who reject it remain stuck in foolishness, repeating the same mistakes. Sign number 5, trusting in their own understanding. A foolish person relies solely on their own knowledge and refuses to acknowledge God's wisdom. Proverbs 3 verses 5 to 6 instructs us to trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways submit to him, and he will make your paths straight. A fool, however, does the opposite. They believe they have all the answers, refusing to seek divine guidance. One of the most tragic examples of this is found in the story of Samson. He was a man blessed with immense strength, chosen by God to deliver Israel from the Philistines. However, Samson often made reckless decisions based on his own desires rather than God's wisdom. He trusted his own strength more than he trusted God, engaging in relationships that led to his downfall. His infatuation with Delilah blinded him to her betrayal, and his arrogance cost him everything. His hair, the source of his strength, was cut, and he was captured by his enemies. This same arrogance is seen in many people today. They rely on their own logic and instincts rather than seeking God's direction. They believe they can control their own destiny without divine guidance. They ignore prayer, dismiss biblical principles, and make choices that lead to destruction. Many people, no matter how intelligent they are, make foolish decisions when they refuse to seek God's wisdom. Trusting in oneself rather than God leads to confusion, mistakes, and regrets. A wise person acknowledges their limitations and surrenders to God's will. They understand that true wisdom comes not from human intelligence, but from divine revelation. The fool, however, continues to believe they know better, walking blindly into disaster. Sign number 6, surrounding themselves with other fools. A foolish person surrounds themselves with other foolish people. Proverbs 13 verse 20 warns, "Walk with the wise and become wise, for a companion of fools suffers harm." The people we associate with have a profound impact on our thinking, behavior, and choices. A foolish person does not seek out wise company, but instead gravitates toward those who encourage recklessness and sin. King Rehoboam, the son of Solomon, is a perfect biblical example of this. When he became king, he had the opportunity to rule wisely. The elders who had advised his father, Solomon, gave him wise counsel, urging him to treat his people with kindness and fairness. But instead of listening to them, Rehoboam turned to his young friends, foolish men who lacked experience. They encouraged him to be harsh and prideful, telling him to increase the burden on his people. His arrogance led to the division of the kingdom, causing irreversible damage. This same foolishness is evident in many people today. Instead of seeking friendships that encourage growth and godliness, they surround themselves with people who promote sinful behaviors. They engage in gossip, reckless spending, unhealthy relationships, and destructive habits. They reject the advice of wise mentors in favor of those who tell them what they want to hear. The Bible consistently warns us about the company we keep. 1 Corinthians 15 verse 33 reminds us, "Do not be misled. Bad company corrupts good character." A wise person carefully chooses their friends, surrounding themselves with people who uplift and guide them toward God. But a foolish person refuses to do this, instead forming relationships that lead them further from wisdom. One of the most dangerous aspects of foolishness is that it thrives in community. When people constantly associate with others who encourage reckless behavior, they reinforce their own foolishness. But those who seek wise counsel find strength, growth, and protection. The Bible makes it clear, wisdom leads to life, while foolishness leads to destruction. A foolish person rejects God's wisdom, speaks without thinking, is quick to anger, refuses correction, trusts in their own understanding, and surrounds themselves with other fools. These behaviors bring harm not only to themselves, but also to those around them. But the good news is that no one is doomed to foolishness. God offers wisdom to anyone who seeks it. Proverbs 9 verse 10 reminds us, "The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom, and the knowledge of the Holy One is understanding." Wisdom starts with humility, acknowledging that we need God's guidance and submitting to His will. Jesus tells us in Matthew 7 verses 24 to 27 that a wise person builds their house on a rock, while a fool builds on sand. When the storms of life come, only those who have built on the foundation of God's wisdom will stand firm. This is a call to action. Are you building your life on wisdom or foolishness? If you recognize areas of foolishness in your life, turn to God today. Seek Him in prayer, study His Word, and surround yourself with wise and godly people. Ask for wisdom, and He will give it generously. James 1 verse 5. The choice is yours. Will you continue down the path of foolishness, or will you embrace God's wisdom and walk in His light? Choose wisely, for your future depends on it.